Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Kardos. I am so glad you made your way to this video so that we can review our notes on Introduction to Integers. If you have the notes that were given out in class, just have those in front of you and with a pencil and fill them out as we go along. You can stop the video at any time and then restart it when you're ready. And if you don't have your notes, just grab a piece of paper and a pencil, because if we have paper and pencil, we can learn some math. That's really all we need. So we're going to start with Introduction to Integers. That is the topic of our video today. And we're going to start with our learning target. So our learning target today is that we're going to be able to identify and order integers as demonstrated by you and me together completing some practice problems successfully. But the key words here are we're going to be able to identify some integers, and we're going to be able to put them in order, least to greatest, before the end of the video. So the first thing we're going to start with is, what are integers? And normally your teachers give you this lovely definition of an integer. An integer is the integers are a set of numbers consisting of all the negative whole numbers, all the positive whole numbers, and 0. And one of the key words in this definition is we're talking about whole numbers, okay? The negative whole numbers and the positive whole numbers. And I also want you to notice the word 0. 0 is an integer. It is neither negative nor positive, but it is an integer. If you're a visual learner, here is a graph that may help you understand it a little bit better, to just be able to see it. 0 is an integer, remember, but it is neither negative nor positive. All your positive numbers and all your negative numbers. These are whole numbers. If you look at the numbers along the bottom, you will not see any fractions or decimals. Now, I'm going to be referring to number lines that go left to right, but I also want you to remember that number lines can also go vertically, and they work in the same way. If you think of like a thermometer, that may help some of you as well. If you have a number line, to turn it on its side and think about going up and going down on the number line for your positives and your negatives. So some examples of integers. Examples of integers would be these that we have on the left. 7 is an integer. It's a positive whole number. -3 is an integer. It's a negative whole number. Then we have 0, which is neither negative nor positive. And then just threw in an extra one there, -6. I could obviously come up with an infinite number of examples for integers, but I just want to give you a few. Now, even more important to me sometimes than the examples are the non-examples. So 7.5 is not an integer. And if we were in class, I would ask you why this is not an integer. You would say because it is a decimal. Decimals cannot be integers. And the same thing with 1/2. 1/2 is not an integer because it is a fraction. Okay, -1/2, even though it has that negative sign on it, it is not an integer. Okay, fractions cannot be integers even if they have a negative sign, and the same goes for decimals. So -4.25, those are not integers. Now, pause the video, and I want you to take a minute and think about whether each one of these numbers on the left here is an integer or not an integer. And when you think you have it and you're confident of your answers, come back and then let's check to make sure that you understand the difference between numbers that are integers and numbers that are not. Okay, well, hopefully you pause the video and you have your answers, so let's go over them. +10. Now, I do want to say here that even though I keep saying +10, you could write a plus sign, and you will see sometimes you'll see a plus sign in front of the 10. But for the most part, we never put the plus sign. It is just understood to be there. If you don't see anything in front of the 10, you're going to assume it's a positive number. So 10 would be an integer. It's positive and it's a whole number. 3.5 is not an integer. And again, I would ask you why it's not an integer, and you would say, yes, that's right. Because it is a decimal, it is not an integer. -6 is negative. It's a whole number. It's an integer. 0, definitely an integer. 3/4 is not an integer, remember, and that's because it is a fraction. And the same with the -3/4, it is not an integer. Now, if you got any of those incorrect, make sure you change it on your paper, because I don't want you to study answers that are incorrect. So make sure you take the time to correct your answer if you got it wrong. All right, now the next section, we're going to be talking about integers that we see in the real world. When you're doing word problems that involve integers, sometimes you're going to come across some of these vocabulary words that I kind of want to talk about a little bit today. So the first one is withdrawal, and the example says $75 bank withdrawal. A withdrawal is where I take money out of my bank account. I go to the ATM, I need some money, I withdraw $75, a withdrawal. So since I'm taking money out of my account, we're going to consider that to be a -$75. So if you're taking notes, you might want to write the word withdrawal down and write that a withdrawal would be something that we would consider to be negative. A $50 bank deposit. A deposit is the opposite of a withdrawal. A deposit is where I go to the bank and I put money into my account. So since I'm putting money into my account, we're going to consider that to be a positive $50. So in your notes, write down the word deposit. Make sure you note deposit, positive. Losing 10 pounds. This one's usually pretty self-explanatory. Most kids get this one. If I'm losing 10 pounds, that's going to be a -10. If I'm gaining 5 pounds, something none of us really like to do, we're going to consider that to be a positive thing if we gained 5 pounds. 500 feet above sea level. If I were taking a hike on a mountain trail, I might see this sign that tells me that my elevation, I'm 500 feet above sea level. That word above is going to let me know that I am on the positive side. And again, you can think of a number line as not just going left to right, but you can also think of a number line as going up and down. So if it's above the 0, which would be sea level, okay, it's going to be positive. And if it's below 0, that's going to be negative. So below sea level, kind of told you this one already, huh? Scuba diver there, he's 250 feet below sea level. We're going to consider that to be negative. 2 degrees below 0. Think about what you think it would be. And hopefully you said -2. -2. And if it's above 0, we're warming up a little bit. Okay, even though 7 degrees is not very warm, it is above 0, so we're going to make that +7. Ooh, this is a good word, ascending. If we're ascending in our little helicopter here, that means we are rising into the air. So make sure you jot down that vocabulary word, ascending 30 feet. That means we're going up, so we're going to consider that to be +30. The opposite of ascending would be descending. So I'm there in my hot air balloon. I'm going down in my hot air balloon towards the earth. So we're going to consider that to be negative, -18 feet. All right, let's switch gears for a second. So sometimes you're going to have to order integers. You're going to have to put them in order, maybe least to greatest, greatest to least, that sort of thing. And the rule for you to remember is that the farther to the right it is on the number line, the greater its value. So you have to know your left from your right in this situation. So if you don't, take a minute, write that in your notes. left and right. Now, most students do not have a problem with the positive numbers because they realize that, yeah, 7, that's greater than 6. It's farther to the right on the number line, so 7 is bigger. Most students even understand that 2, okay, is bigger than 0. Okay, I have $2. That's definitely more than having $0, okay? And 2 is farther to the right on the number line. However, many times students get confused when they have two negative numbers, which they are comparing. So let's say I'm comparing -6 and -7. -6 is actually greater than -7 because it is farther to the right on the number line. I like to think of it as I would rather owe somebody $6 than owe them $7. I actually have more money if I only owe someone $6 than if I owe them $7. So that one can be a little counterintuitive for students. So just make sure you think it through when you're talking, if you have two negative numbers to compare. So let's do a little practice. Which is greater? Think it through. +8 or -9. And hopefully you said +8. So I'm going to use my little alligator mouth like you learned in elementary school. Okay, he's always really hungry. He wants to eat the greater number, right? So +8 is actually bigger than -9. Let's try another one. Think it through. Which is greater? And hopefully you said that 0 is greater than -7. Next problem, think it through, compare -5 and -6. Which one is greater? And the correct answer would be -5, okay? Because -5 would be farther to the right on the number line than -6. Pause the video for a second. Order these numbers from least to greatest. So start with the smallest number you see and put them in order. Smallest to biggest, least to greatest. Come back when you have that completed. All right, hopefully you finished that. So I'm going to go ahead and go over the answer here. So the number that would be farthest to the left on my number line for this problem would be -15. And then -6 on the number line. I don't see any other negative numbers, so 0. And then 1, 7, 15, and 20. So now they're in order from least to greatest. So we come to the end of the lesson, so let's just check and make sure that we covered everything that was in our learning target for today. We can now identify what is an integer and what is not an integer, and we can also put them in order, smallest to biggest, or compare two numbers to see which is greater. So you guys did a great job today. Remember, a little progress each day adds up to big results. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye.